Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I Have Something to Say, where subject matter experts are unafraid and unapologetic about sharing their perspectives regarding issues that impact our lives. They speak up because basically they give a shit. So if you're tired of canned answers and want to finally hear real people cut through the BS and talk about real issues, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Sami Jimen Marrero from Urbender, and behind our mixer is our producer, Chris Majoka from UdoU. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode. And I just felt that it was extremely important to invite my friend, Thali Sugisawa, to come on the show today. After what happened last week, I struggled to reach out to her the day that the women were attacked and murdered in Atlanta, Georgia, in a senseless act of violence that was clearly rooted in hate, and against, Asian people and against women also particularly. And I called Thali the next morning because I just couldn't call her that day because I knew I was going to lose it. And it was not my place to lose it when she was probably, and we talked about it, right, Thali? I'm so sorry that these are the circumstances, that we're having this conversation. But, these are conversations that need to be had. And I know that you've always, your work, and I can't say your life's work because you're still very, you're young compared to me, you're like my little sister, and I see such a bright future and all the amazing things that you're going to do, but so far you've really dedicated your life and every single day to building equity and understanding and safe spaces. And oh my God, I don't want to get emotional, but you just do the work. And last week when this happened, I thought of you and other friends, but I had to talk to you in the morning because I just felt so hurt because I'm like, you do so much, and I knew how you were feeling. I just knew, and I just had to, hear you out. And anyway, so I'll shut up now. And I just want you to share, how you felt and, your background and, your truth and what matters and all of that good stuff. So anyway, I'm sorry.
Don't be. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. Well, for calling me last week. And yeah, it's been hard. I feel like over the days I've been getting better and feeling stronger, but it hits home so bad. And I just really appreciate being here, not representing any organizations, just being me, just being a friend, being a voice, being someone who cares. I think that's so important. And I often say that, I'm not a specialist on anything. I'm a specialist in my own story and my own experiences. So you will rarely see me quoting books or articles because I really speak based off my experience and my feelings and what I've gone through and what I still go through. Being biracial, being a Latina, Asian woman, back in Brazil. I was born and raised in Brazil. My mother is Brazilian, my father is Japanese. I am the second generation of Japanese immigrants in Brazil. My mom, the first Brazilian to join my dad's family, coming from a dismantled family. She was orphaned at the age of 4. So married my dad very, very young at 17, and basically lived all together with my dad's family. They were very poor at the time. And I grew up in this duality, right? My mom being the first Brazilian in the family, and the family being so rooted in Japanese culture. I grew up listening that, I was mixed and that was not pure Japanese. Um, but then I would go to school or meet with my Brazilian friends, and then with them, I was not Brazilian.
Mm.
I was the Jap, or the Japanese girl, or the Asian, or whatever eyes, or just nicknames. And you say I'm young, but I'm reaching for that year.
Well,
Uh, and at that
listen, I'm 10 years older than you, so
time,
that's a
yeah.
that's a large enough gap for me to say, "Oh my goodness, if I was 10 years younger right now."
No, I feel like the upbringing and how to deal with bullying and with racism was the same.
Yeah.
Um, on the Asian side, it was always like you just ignore it. Ignore it. It's nothing. Take the high road, or you know, just um just let it go. It's whatever. It's gonna keep happening. So if you care about it, then it's just gonna be bad for you, because it's gonna keep happening, because here we are in this country where they embraced us, but not really, you know
Mhm.
so, yeah, my whole life, and the reason why I moved here to the US was kind of because of that. Like at very early age, I set my mind on, I'm not gonna live here because I don't belong. I'm not Japanese, I'm not Brazilian, so I'm gonna go somewhere else. And I was, I think, 10 or 11 when I set my mind to that. And it's interesting, this past week, or even like the last year or so, I've always been involved in social movements and community projects, but with the uprising of Black Lives Matter, and really more people getting involved, white people getting involved, and the rising of allies, um, that brought me a sense of, I can't really escape this. Wherever I go, I will still be like stereotype. I will
Right.
my my story, my face, my body, everything will still be stereotype. It's still going to be hypersexualized, the bodies of Asian women or our culture, right? So that's it's like some reckoning that I've been facing since last year. And it's funny because I've been seeing interviews with a lot of Asian leaders, and it's so interesting to see them speaking up finally and
Mhm.
saying that, we this always happened to us since the beginning, when immigration was started to be more prominent here or anywhere in the world. But we always had this culture of don't rock the boat, right? And because I think our cultures are so centered in the collective, it's like, don't why are you gonna say something that's gonna make this person feel uncomfortable? It's enough for one person to feel uncomfortable. If that's you, just sit with it and
Mhm.
don't rock the boat. So I I I feel that's so bad, because I think in our conversation over the phone, the first thing that I thought after the terrorism attack in those spas was that nothing changed, you know. And my sister is 21 years old now. My daughter is going to be 10. I've been involved again in social movements for a long time, but nothing really changed. Still, there are hate crimes, actually, hate crimes against Asian Americans. I was checking the statistics before our podcast recording, and it was almost 2,000% up.
Yeah.
So I just felt really defeated.
Mhm.
I felt very small and little, and thinking that I should have done more. I should have made others feel uncomfortable. Why did I stay quiet? And then all the stories and all the advices that I got from my grandma, who was a powerful woman, went through a divorce in the early 80s and survived, back in the day when divorce in Japanese communities in Brazil was a big sin. She was cursed, and but she was an entrepreneur and she moved ahead, and she was just an amazing woman involved in the arts and businesswoman. However, being so submissive her whole life, her advice to me when I got married was, when the man is angry, just be very quiet and then it will go away. And I think, like, how can a woman be so empowered, so brave, so courageous, and at the same time be so immersed in this kind of behavior, like the submission and, the silencing of Asian women, inside the communities and outside. So,
Right.
I mean, you were right. I've been going, like, it's been super heavy for me because I've been going back to those stories, right? Um,
Yeah, I know you
my
mentioned to me like yeah, you mentioned to me about like your grandmother in her business, like she used to cut hair, and that really struck me. How
yes,
you because I it brought a visual to me about what that, and it made me feel you describing it, I can't even imagine how she felt.
yeah.
Yeah, so could you
So
share that?
she taught my mom, right, how to do hair, how to cut hair. And I remember her advice being, when you're cutting men's hair, they will lose their arms like this, outside the chair, and they will try to touch your legs. They will try to touch you. But what you have to do, just move quickly to the other side and don't make eye contact because you don't want to lose a client over this.
Yeah.
So I, you know, when do a barber needs to follow an advice like this?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it just hit me, and I'm like, what did I do to change this? I just again took it very personally, thinking about the next generations, right? Thinking about my sister and my daughter. And I'm like, men are still going in spas because what, they had a bad day? Is that the explanation? And then he shot 6 women.
Yeah. Mhm.
And we don't, and what, for the weekend, what I was most appalled and sad about is that what what are their stories? Who's gonna tell those stories? Who were those women?
Mhm.
So it's just so easy for Asian women to be small and invisible and, just smile and keep going. And this needs to change. It's,
Yeah.
you know, maybe it's taking me 4 decades, but
Yeah.
enough.
Yes.
Smiling, making eye contact, and
Mhm.
just, being silent. And
Mhm.
and and I do feel like that's actually what my grandma is expecting of me. You know,
Mhm.
um, looking from up there to me, I feel like that's what she's expecting of me. She did what she had to do. She gave me her good advice because, I think that's the best she could do. But
She wanted you to survive. That's
yeah,
why. Yeah.
yes, but I think if she's seeing me now, which I think she is, she's expecting exactly this from me. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a crazy
Yeah.
wild
Yeah.
days since
Yes.
people
Yeah.
think.
And I know that, those are very subtle how do you say advances or aggressions, right? And violations to your sense and your identity, like what you described with your mom and grandma cutting hair, and and having those experiences, and that sense of, okay, the remedy is avoidance, right? So you
Yeah,
scurry around it, and you don't make eye contact, and just pretend it's not there. But you have experience also very direct, comments, even in like serious meetings and stuff about, your combined, your blended heritage, right? Because you shared that with me. And
Yeah.
I was like, what? Like, I couldn't believe it. Like, please share, because the thing is, people don't realize how insulting and aggressive, and how hurtful words can be, and yeah, so because you mentioned to me about how when someone found out that you were half Brazilian and half Japanese, what was the like knee jerk reaction
Yeah,
you got
it was an older man, older
in a
Caucasian man
meeting, right? In a
in
meeting.
in a meeting, and he said, "Oh, that's the best of all worlds." And it's not really what you say, but the way you say it as well. It's both, right? But also your intonation says a lot. So I'm just always struck by it. And I was talking to one of my Asian friends who went through something even worse, like comments in a work meeting too. And she called me afterwards and she was like, I should have said something, but I just froze. Like,
Hmm.
I don't know why, but I just froze. And we were discussing, it's like I feel so bad that I didn't say anything. Like I know the speech, I know what I should have said, and still like I
Yeah.
didn't say anything. And I'm like, it freezes us because we're just so used to being silent. We're used to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
We're used to thinking, okay, going to this meeting, majority of men, so maybe I'll just, cover my body more. So yeah, and comments, stereotyping comments for me that I receive usually when I share about my culture, my heritage, being Brazilian Japanese or Japanese Brazilian. It's usually the worst, like, oh, I wish I it's my dream to go to Brazil and go to carnival. Or it is I love Japan, I love manga, I love the culture. So everything, they're not complimenting our biodiversity, they're not complimenting our, food. No, they're talking specifically about cultural events, but that are completely and directly focused on women's bodies.
Right.
So
They're sexually charged. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So um,
It's
yeah,
disturbing, isn't it? It's disturbing and absolutely gross. That's,
it
yeah. Yeah.
is. It really is. So I'm happy to see that younger generations are making a
Mhm.
difference, and I loved seeing how the Asian community has been bridging to the Black community and how supportive they were when the whole protest last summer happened. Here in the city, I remember seeing one poster on the cardboard saying Koreans for Black Lives Matter. And
Mhm.
that just like filled up my heart because,
Mhm.
you know, we've been divided even in minorities, and you know that, even
Yeah.
inside Asian communities, because how many countries are in Asia,
I
and
know. Yeah.
there's so much racism even inside this community, and colorism as well. So
Mhm.
to see that younger generations are standing up and saying, enough. And I think it was either Friday or Saturday on Black Lives Matter Instagram account, they also posted something about supporting Asian American Pacific Islanders community.
Mhm.
So I'm like, finally, I think we're finally getting that, it was on the interest of whiteness to keep us separated, to keep
Right.
us divided, to keep us, fighting against each other, fearing each other, and
Mhm.
I love that this veil fell, maybe
Yeah.
not older generations were still somewhat um conservatives, but
And
it,
guarded
yeah,
too.
unguarded, they have gone through so much, don't really blame them, but
Yeah.
um, it is wonderful to see that younger generations are speaking up and are really making a difference. So I am what I'm positioning myself is just like tell me what you need. I'm right here. I'm
Exactly.
really
Yeah.
good with running things and like just throw things at me and I'll do my
Yeah.
best, to
Yeah.
tackle and help with in any capacity, that.
Absolutely. Oh, yes, totally, totally. Because that's the kind of person you are. Since I've met you, you've always been, solutions driven and just in the weeds of it too, not just strategizing, which you do really well, but actually like rolling up your sleeves and getting it done, and really trying to impact people and make a difference. And so I knew it. I know that before we started recording this episode, the first thing I asked you was, "What are you up to?" Because I knew all I needed was to wait the weekend. We were recording this on a Monday to air it this Thursday, and I'm like, "That's the first thing I'm going to ask her, so I can show up too, because I want to show up with my family." And so tell me, I mean, what? I know that that those first 24, 48 hours were hard, and thank you for allowing me to share on LinkedIn and Facebook, your poignant just sentiment, how you felt. It was just so pure, but it was like a dagger in my heart, because I was like, you haven't failed, Tali. You do so much. Oh my gosh, and I don't want you to ever think for 1 second that because sometimes, like you said, you feel so small, and that what you do, it's like you're almost like running against the current, but you do so much, and it doesn't go unnoticed. Holy shit. It's like whoever knows you, like, really knows you. I think that's the best part of it, that you show up always in your full power and always giving, your full self to whatever you put your mind and your heart and your talents into. And that shows. And I think that that's the biggest thing that you contribute, is that you model human behavior like nobody's business. Like, really, So that said, what are you up to? What are you up to? Because I'm showing up, and of course, this is gonna, when we post it, I'm still gonna post it. Send me the information, because I'll share it before this airs. But this is what we need to do, right? Is just take action. And so, what have you decided to do?
Semi, you're so kind. You say those things, and I'm like, who is this person? She's
Well,
so.
you don't see it, but everybody else does, and I know Chris is behind the scenes. He knows you really well too, and so, yeah, you don't see it, mama. But
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, so what are you up to? Because I know you that well, that I knew the weekend
Yeah.
pass, she's up to something. So I just need to ask, where do I show up, right? So
Yeah.
tell me, what
Yeah.
what are you doing?
My friend Shelly Wong, who is Mayor Damin's special assistant for bridging the Asian community in Orange County, I reached out to her and I said, what are we doing? And she said, I've been in contact with the student group at UCF, and they're planning something. So let's help them. Let's empower them. Because, of course,
Yeah.
there are several Asian organizations here, but I just love the idea of working with the next generation,
Yeah.
and empowering them, bringing our experience and our strategies with their drive, with their heart, with their fresh breath of
And
seeing
their
things.
determination, because they're
Yeah,
determined to fix this. Yes. Uh-huh.
exactly, exactly. So I'm like, I'm game. So Tuesday, our first event's going to be a vigil
Hmm.
Tuesday at UCF at a maybe the reflective pond. I'm not 100% sure the
Okay.
location, if I'm saying this right, but it's going to be at UCF starting at 6:30. Check-in starts at 5:30, and we're going to have some spoken word, and a few people will say a few things, and it's just going to be a time to grieve and together as a community, and to listen to each other and be there and remember those victims, who are women, mothers,
Yeah.
hustlers.
And their
Like,
families. Hmm.
yes, yes. So That's it. Tuesday, tomorrow, March 20. Third,
Third.
6:30, yes, March 23rd, 6:30, at UCF. There's an event on Facebook with all the details and information that you can sign up to participate.
Yeah.
And other than that, it's just, we're promoting a national movement that it's called stopaapihate.org.
Hmm. Hmm.
So they've been doing a great job of documenting and reporting. They have a portal for you to report if you suffered any kind of racism or aggression. You can report through their portal, and they're keeping statistics. And I think it's associated with the University of San Francisco, if I'm not mistaken. So there are scholars behind it to track,
Yeah.
and to get some research out of that, and also to get those people some help, because it's always hard to report, especially if you're being so used to being quiet, and if you're
Hmm.
being being ignored, or
Hmm.
even if you're a younger generation, you may think, and I thought about that too.
Hmm.
The Black community problem is so much bigger. Like, it is, it's so intense. Like, how come can I bring my problems to the table if they are facing what they're facing,
Hmm.
um, but what I've learned throughout this year is that this is also a strategy to keep us divided, you know
Yeah.
so when the whataboutism, so, but what about this and what about that? And you did this, and Asians are racist, and Black people don't like Asians. So this is just a strategy to keep us divided. And we also see this in the Latino community, right?
Oh, yes,
So we see that
absolutely.
a lot. And as I mentioned before, I love that there is, some recognition that this like strategy
Hmm.
from white supremacy is not going to prevail, because we are united. So
Hmm.
I love that. I really love that. It
Yeah.
gives me a lot of hope. So that's been my process, just in shock, and then paralyzed, and then grieving, and then just trying to take some action, and also trying to take care of myself, and giving me grace. And uh, because I'm biracial, right? When I'm
Yeah.
asked, like when you ask me to come here, I'm also thinking, am I the right person? Like, because maybe I'm only half Asian, maybe I should
They,
meet you
I mean,
somebody
I'm
else
gonna
who's
tell
more
you
Asian than
something.
me.
Yes, that's been really
Yeah,
ingrained, right? And so,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. So,
yeah.
and I think even like growing up, and I feel like a lot of biracial kids will will relate to that, is that you're just so in the middle, and it's just so hard to pick a side, that you kind of like numb yourself, and then you don't take sides, and then you kind of like very in the middle. So
Yeah.
when I'm asked, like, but do you think you're more Brazilian or Japanese? I'm like, I
I
don't,
see that. Because
I cannot
you
answer.
embrace both, though. Yes,
Yes,
you fully embrace both, but it took you. It was a struggle, right? To get there, in the sense where, not that you were negating yourself, but in terms of processing how those two
yeah,
cultures could coexist. Because I know we've had these,
exactly.
these
Yeah,
conversations before, in the past few years. So yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
And so I have a question for you, because sometimes people want to do something, but just don't know how, because they say, well, I just don't want to be disrespectful, or I don't want to overstep my, well, certain boundaries, or overstay my welcome, or say the wrong thing, and so I want to leave, some practical takeaways, from your point of view, from your truth, from your experiences, what's helpful, and please say what is not too, right? So what is helpful in a situation like this, or like, for example, if you hear that, a loved one, because it, and you know what, I was talking about this with Scott, my husband, just yesterday when we were walking the dog, and I'm like, I'm afraid about, when people go back into the world after being so isolated and separated, like what happened in Miami with all those fights. And, it's like, oh, wow, did that ever happen before? And I'm like, no. I mean, I used to party in South Beach, when it was packed, that you couldn't move, and I mean, did fights break out and stuff, but not so much that you had to shut down the joint, And so I wonder if these tensions, when everybody gets back out, if it's going to be worse. That's my biggest fear, that the violence is going to be like really, really chaotic. And so, what's your advice for people that do want to, connect and create positive relationships and put positive energy into the world and be supportive and be not only an ally but an accomplice, to equity and to nonviolence and to, you know what I'm saying? So what do you do and what don't you do? If you could help me out with that regarding the Asian
Yes, yeah,
community specifically,
yeah.
from the equity lens from a Asian standpoint.
Mhm. I think first off, just reach out to your friends. I think a lot of them are feeling a little overwhelmed, and even them are not really knowing what to do, what to do next. Because again, we've been very used to just take care of others and not ourselves. So now that we are kind of, in the center, it feels weird. So reach out to them, validate them, ask about their feelings. Asian people have so much trouble talking about their feelings. And again, I don't want to paint a broad brush because, there's so many Asian countries and so many cultures inside those countries. But still, there is a level of difficulty in talking about our feelings. So I think I wouldn't say that something is not helpful. Each organization and person will feel or think differently. And I'll share my experience. For example, last time when I reached out to the Black community, uh, not mainly because of my job, but because I've been following Black Lives Matter since their inception. And I noticed that I think as allies, how we need to um, not behave, but our stance should be, I may be right, I may be wrong, but I'm willing to be wrong as I am aiming to do right. Some
Yeah.
some people will want you to speak up, right? I had Black friends who said, Tali, I am freaking tired of
Mhm.
speaking up. I've been speaking up for years. You folks don't listen, you don't listen. So
Mm.
I'm done. It's your turn to speak up. You have to say something. Our white allies need to say something. And with other organizations or people, they're like, Tali, it's not your time to speak. It's our turn. You have to center us.
Yeah.
So, I don't think in activism, I really don't think there is like something that it's not black and white. It's not
Right
100%
and wrong.
right
Yeah.
or wrong. It is trying and being humble enough, to recognizing that maybe that was not the best approach with that organization. And I'm not saying, you just go with your intentions and you don't do your studies or work, but do your studies, do your work, and show up in your best capacity, but also be ready to receive some criticism and don't let that break you. Don't be
Mhm.
fragile.
Yeah.
If you're why it is a tough job. It is very uncomfortable, right? Even to recognize in ourselves where we are perpetuating those behaviors and those comments and those conversations, in
Mhm.
friends barbecues or in galas, wherever you are, in workplace, at your kid's school. So it is very uncomfortable work. So my advice, if I can give any, is just be ready to be uncomfortable and be ready to, not be right all the time.
Yeah, totally, totally. I think for me, it's been helpful just to ask questions, but not
Yeah.
ask questions based on assumptions. It's or like,
Mhm.
how do you feel? So I don't want to assume you feel something. It's like it's more like, what do you need from me? How
Yeah.
can I, so that way it's a more broad question,
Hmm.
but then you need to then show up.
Yeah.
Don't say how can I help, and then say, well, I have plans on Saturday, so I'm not sure
Yeah.
if I'm able
Right.
to.
Exactly. Exactly.
Exactly. So you
Yeah.
just have to be, yeah, real about it, right?
Yeah.
And authentic.
But sometimes it doesn't take much. Friday, I invited a couple of friends to just have ice cream. Like,
Mhm,
want to just go meet outside and eat ice cream, and
mhm.
of course, we talked about what's happening, but at the same time, it was just good to be out eating ice cream and connecting with someone who cares. It comes down. I saw this quote that the only way to survive is by taking care of each other. And
Mhm.
sometimes ice cream. Sometimes that means, putting your money where your mouth is. And sometimes it is showing up to protest. So
Mhm.
different every time, but having in mind that it's taking care of each other that really will save us. And Sammy, I've been learning that from you, of course, because
Oh,
you're a master caretaker of your
oh.
friends, of your community. It's amazing. So
Well, yeah, I mean, your heart, it's hard not to love you, and it's also hard not to love you and to care, and so yeah. I mean, I just honestly feel that we feed off each other, and that the universe, God, divine intervention,
yeah,
whatever you want to call it, right, has really uh done us a favor,
yeah.
by making us, bump into each other. And it's just wonderful. It's just absolutely wonderful. I honestly think that that's the best advice is just care for each other. Be intentional and I mean, that's it. I think that's the best way to uh yeah, to close. There's really nothing more, right, to be added right now, but just care for each other. Thank you so much, Tali,
Thank
for
you.
being you and for caring enough to, come here and be yourself and be vulnerable and sharing, your experiences and, your candid, opinion about what's going on and what needs to happen, and I thank you for your friendship and for your sisterhood and just, being the lovely Tali, that we can always count on to bridge gaps and really spread love, so thank you.
Thank you, Sammy. Thank you, Arvinder.
This concludes this episode of I Have Something to Say. We want to thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to tell your friends about us. We're on Spotify and iTunes as well. There's more to come next week. And remember, if you have something to say, it's time to speak up.